The air in Miami's Wynwood district pulsed with life, thick with the scent of sea salt and perfume, the kind of night that made you feel like anything could happen. Neon lights flickered above the art-covered walls, casting pinks and blues across the crowd. Reggaeton blasted from hidden speakers, the bass vibrating through Nia Thompson's chest as she wove through the chaos of the art festival she'd spent months planning. Her red dress clung to her curves, catching the light with every step, and her curls bounced as she moved, a beacon of confidence in a sea of strangers. Nia paused to check her clipboard, her eyes scanning the list of vendors. Everything was running smoothly, too smoothly, which made her suspicious. She'd learned the hard way that perfection was usually the calm before a storm. As she adjusted her earpiece, a low voice cut through the noise, smooth as whiskey over ice. "You look like you're holding this whole night together." She glanced up and her breath caught. The man standing before her was tall with broad shoulders, filling out a tailored black shirt, unbuttoned just enough to hint at the strength beneath. His dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, and his hazel eyes held a spark that felt dangerous, like a match waiting to ignite. Lucas Bennett, she realized, recognizing him from the guest list. Tech billionaire, founder of a Seattle AI startup that was reshaping the world, the kind of man who could buy this entire festival and not blink. Nia tilted her head, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "And you look like you're about to cause trouble." His laugh was low, warm, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "Only the good kind," he said, stepping closer. The crowd seemed to fade, the neon lights framing him like a painting. "Dance with me." It wasn't a question, but Nia wasn't one to be swept away so easily. She raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "I'm working, Mr. Bennett Lucas," he corrected, his voice dropping an octave. "And I'm not asking you to stop working, just take a moment." The music shifted to a sultry salsa, beat the kind that made your hips want to move whether you liked it or not. Nia hesitated, but something in Lucas's gaze, half challenge, half plea, pulled her in. She set her clipboard on a nearby table and took his outstretched hand. His grip was firm, warm, and as he led her to the open space between the art stalls, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Their bodies moved in sync, his hand on her waist, guiding her through the steps. The neon lights painted their skin in shifting colors, and the heat of his touch seared through the thin fabric of her dress. Nia's pulse raced as their hips swayed, their breaths mingling in the humid air. His scent, sandalwood and something darker like leather, wrapped around her, intoxicating. When he spun her, her dress flared and his hand caught her lower back, pulling her close. Too close. "You're good at this," she said, her voice huskier than she intended. "You make it easy," he murmured, his lips brushing her ear. "You make me forget the rest of the world." Nia, her heart stuttered at the sound of her name on his lips, but she caught a flicker in his eyes, a shadow like he was holding something back. Before she could question it, the song ended and the crowd erupted in applause. Nia stepped back, her skin still tingling where he'd touched her. "Duty calls," she said, forcing a smile. "Don't cause too much trouble, Lucas." He grinned, but that shadow lingered in his gaze. No promises. The next few weeks were a whirlwind, like something out of a dream Nia hadn't dared to imagine. Lucas didn't just pursue her, he consumed her. Their first date was at a rooftop restaurant in South Beach, the Miami skyline glittering below like a sea of stars. The clink of champagne glasses mingled with the distant crash of waves, and Lucas's laughter filled the spaces where Nia's doubts tried to creep in. "You grew up in Atlanta, right?" he asked, leaning forward, his eyes locked on hers. "Tell me about it." Nia sipped her drink, the bubbles sharp on her tongue. "It's loud, messy, full of soul. My mom's restaurant was the heart of our neighborhood. Still is. Smell of cornbread and collards every Sunday. Kids running through the streets, music everywhere. What about you, Seattle boy?" His smile faltered just for a second. "Detroit, actually. Not much to tell. Rough neighborhood, big dreams." He changed the subject, but Nia filed that moment away, a puzzle piece she didn't yet understand. That night, he invited her to his penthouse, a sleek space of glass and steel overlooking the ocean. The private elevator hummed softly, and as the doors opened, Nia's breath caught at the view. Moonlight reflecting off the water, the city lights a distant glow. Lucas poured her a glass of wine, his fingers brushing hers and the air between them crackled. "You're dangerous, you know that?" she teased, setting her glass down. "Only because you're irresistible," he shot back, closing the distance between them. The kiss was electric, hungry, like they'd both been starving for it. His hands found her waist, pulling her against him, and Nia's fingers tangled in his hair. The room spun, the only sounds their ragged breaths and the faint lap of waves outside. He lifted her onto the counter, his lips trailing down her neck, igniting sparks across her skin. The glow from the infinity pool outside danced across the ceiling, casting their shadows in a slow, sensual rhythm. "Lucas," she gasped, her hands gripping his shoulders as he pressed himself closer, the heat of his body overwhelming. His shirt fell open, revealing the hard planes of his chest, and Nia's fingers traced the lines, memorizing him. For a moment they were lost in each other, the world reduced to the taste of his lips, the sound of his low groans, the feel of his hands claiming her. But when they finally pulled apart, breathless, Nia saw that shadow in his eyes again. He smiled, but it didn't reach his soul. "You're incredible, Nia," he said, his voice rough. She wanted to believe him, but a part of her wondered what he wasn't saying. Their romance bloomed against the backdrop of Miami's vibrant chaos. Lucas flew her to private dinners, sent her bouquets of hibiscus that filled her tiny apartment with color, and called her late at night to talk about everything and nothing. He listened when she spoke about her dreams of opening an art gallery, his questions sharp and genuine, like her opinions mattered more than his billions. Within months, Nia had a key to his penthouse, and they were planning a future together, or so she thought. The proposal came during a weekend getaway to Key West, where the sunset painted the sky in shades of coral and gold. Lucas led her to a private dock where a yacht waited its deck strewn with rose petals. He dropped to one knee, the diamond ring in his hand, catching the last rays of light. "Nia, you've brought color back into my world," he said, his voice trembling. "Marry me?" Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Yes." The ring felt heavy on her finger, a promise she believed was unbreakable. But sometimes, late at night, she'd catch Lucas staring out at the ocean, lost in thoughts he wouldn't share. She told herself it was nothing that everyone had ghosts. What mattered was their future. The engagement party was set in Detroit, Lucas's hometown, at a historic theater he'd restored as part of a charity project. The Fox Theater's marquee glowed against the night sky, and inside the air buzzed with the chatter of art patrons and tech moguls. Nia moved through the crowd in a teal silk gown, her curls swept up, feeling like she was floating. Lucas, in a tailored tux, kept her close, his hand warm on the small of her back. "You've made me the luckiest man alive," he whispered, his breath tickling her ear. She shivered, leaning into him, the world perfect, for one shining moment. Then everything changed. Nia was chatting with a gallery owner when she felt Lucas's hand slip away. She turned, expecting to see him greeting another guest, but instead he stood frozen in the center of the room, his champagne glass halfway to his lips. His eyes were locked on a woman across the theater, a woman Nia hadn't noticed until now. She was striking with deep brown skin and natural curls, framing her face, dressed in a simple black jumpsuit that somehow outshone every designer gown in the room. Lena Harper. Nia would later learn an artist whose murals were transforming Detroit's forgotten corners. But in that moment, all Nia knew was the way Lena looked at Lucas, and the way he looked back, like they were the only two people in the world. The crowd parted as Lucas set his glass on a waiter's tray and walked toward her, his steps deliberate, almost trance-like. Nia's heart pounded the theater's warm lights suddenly too bright, the murmur of voices too loud. When Lucas reached Lena, they didn't speak at first. They just stood there inches apart, the air between them heavy with unspoken history. Then, as the string quartet shifted to a slow, haunting melody, Lucas offered his hand. Lena took it, and they moved to the center of the dance floor. The theater seemed to hold its breath, their bodies aligned effortlessly, her head resting against his shoulder, his hand knowing exactly where to rest on her back when he spun her. Their movements were fluid, practiced like they'd danced this way 1,000 times before. Nia stood rooted to the spot, her champagne flute cold against her palm. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Who's that with Lucas?" someone murmured. "Poor Nia. She looks devastated." Heat flooded her face, but she couldn't look away. Lucas's expression was raw, vulnerable in a way Nia had never seen, and Lena's eyes glistened with what looked like years of unshed tears. Her best friend Kyla appeared at her side, pressing a fresh glass into her hand. "Drink this," she said quietly, "and smile. Everyone's watching." Nia took a sip. The bubbles, sharp and bitter. Smiling was impossible. The music stretched on each note, a knife in her chest. When the song ended, Lucas kept hold of Lena's hand. Their heads bent together as they exchanged words. Nia couldn't hear. Then, in front of the entire room, including Nia, his fiancée, he brought Lena's hand to his lips, a gesture so tender it felt like a betrayal. The party resumed its rhythm, but Nia's world had tilted off its axis. Lucas eventually returned to her side, his face composed, but his eyes betrayed him. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Just an old friend," he said, but his voice was too smooth, too practiced. "I'm sorry for leaving you like that." His words rang hollow, and the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for hers told her there was more to the story. Nia forced a smile, nodding to a passing guest, but her mind was racing. Whoever Lena Harper was, she wasn't just an old friend. She was a piece of Lucas. Nia didn't know a piece that might change everything. Later, in the back of a limousine gliding through Detroit's quiet streets, Nia stared out at the city lights, their glow blurred by the tinted windows. Lucas sat beside her, silent, his profile sharp against the darkness. The space between them felt like an ocean, cold and vast. She clutched her purse, the weight of the engagement ring pressing into her finger. "Lucas," she said finally, her voice cutting through the silence. "Who is she? And don't lie to me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Her name's Lena Harper. She was someone important to me a long time ago. But that's all it is, Nia. The past, the past." Nia's voice shook, her anger rising. "You looked at her like she's your present, like I wasn't even there." His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw guilt, raw and unfiltered. "I'm sorry," he said softer now. "I didn't mean to hurt you, I wasn't expecting to see her." Nia turned away, her throat tight. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she focused on the city outside, the neon signs and shadowed alleys, a place that held secrets she needed to uncover. Lena Harper had turned her perfect love story upside down with one dance, and Nia wasn't going back to Miami until she knew why. If that electric moment under the neon lights set your heart racing, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about a time love made your world spin. Don't miss what happens next in Nia's story. Trust me, it's only getting started. The Detroit night pressed against the limousine's windows, a maze of flickering streetlights and rusted industrial skeletons. Nia Thompson sat rigid in the plush leather seat, her teal silk gown pooling around her like spilled ink. The weight of her engagement ring felt like a stone, and the silence between her and Lucas Bennett was suffocating. His words from earlier, just an old friend, echoed in her mind, each syllable a lie she couldn't swallow. Lena Harper wasn't just anyone. The way Lucas had looked at her, the way their bodies had moved together on that dance floor, told a story Nia hadn't been invited to read. She glanced at him, his profile sharp against the city's glow. His jaw was tight, his hands clasped in his lap, but he didn't look at her. He was somewhere else, lost in memories she wasn't part of. The hum of the engine filled the void, punctuated by the occasional clatter of a loose manhole cover under the tires. Nia's fingers tightened around her purse, her nails digging into the leather. "I'm staying in Detroit," she said finally, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Lucas turned his hazel eyes wide with surprise. "What, Nia?" "We're flying back to Miami tomorrow." "You're flying back." She corrected her tone, steady despite the storm in her chest. "I need answers, Lucas, and I'm not leaving until I get them." He opened his mouth, then closed it, running a hand through his dark hair. "Nia, there's nothing to find. Lena's part of my past. You're my future. Then why did you look at her like she's your whole world?" The words spilled out, raw and jagged. "Don't gaslight me, Lucas. I saw it. Everyone saw it." His face crumpled just for a moment before he rebuilt his composure. "I'm sorry," he said softer now. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Seeing her, it caught me off guard." "That's all?" Nia shook her head, turning back to the window. The city blurred past graffiti-covered warehouses, neon signs for dive bars, the ghosts of Detroit's industrial past. She wasn't letting this go, not when her heart was screaming for the truth. The next morning, Nia checked into a boutique hotel in Detroit's midtown, a converted factory with exposed brick walls and industrial chic decor. The smell of fresh coffee wafted from the lobby, mingling with the faint metallic tang of the old building. She stood by her room's window, watching the city wake up delivery trucks, rumbling artists hauling canvases to nearby galleries. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kyla, her best friend and a freelance journalist who'd flown in for the engagement party. "Meet me at the Rusty Nail noon. We need to talk." Nia's stomach twisted. Kyla had a knack for digging up dirt, and if anyone could help her unravel the mystery of Lena Harper, it was her. She pulled on jeans, a fitted black top, and her favorite leather jacket, the one that made her feel like she could take on the world. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman who was fierce, determined, but the shadows under her eyes betrayed the sleepless night she'd spent replaying that dance. The Rusty Nail was a dive bar in a gritty corner of Detroit, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the daylight. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale beer and fried onions, and the jukebox played a low, mournful blues track. Kyla sat at a corner booth, her braids swept into a high bun, a laptop open in front of her. She looked up as Nia slid into the seat across from her, pushing a glass of bourbon her way. "You look like hell," Kyla said, her voice blunt but warm. "Drink this, then spill." Nia took a sip, the liquor burning a path down her throat. "I don't even know where to start." "Lucas, he danced with this woman last night, Lena Harper, like I wasn't even there." Kyla's eyebrows shot up. "Lena Harper, the muralist." "Damn girl, you're in deep. You know her." Nia leaned forward, her heart racing. "Not personally, but she's kind of a big deal in the art world. Her murals are all over Detroit. Real raw stuff, not that gentrified nonsense. I did a piece on her a couple years ago." Kyla tapped her laptop, pulling up an article. "But that's not the juicy part. Word is, she and Lucas go way back. Like saved his life back." Nia's breath caught. Saved his life? What does that mean? Kyla leaned in, lowering her voice. Story goes. They were kids together in a rough part of town. Lucas got into some bad stuff. Think joyriding, petty theft, that kind of thing. One night he crashed a stolen car. Could have died, or worse, ended up in jail. Lena was there, pulled him out, got him cleaned up before the cops showed, kept him from spiraling. Nia's mind reeled the bourbon forgotten in her hand. Lucas had told her he grew up in Detroit, but he'd painted it as a vague, distant memory, poor but manageable. Nothing like this. Why didn't he tell me, she whispered more to herself than Kyla. Because men like Lucas don't like looking weak. Kyla said, her tone matter-of-fact. He's built this shiny billionaire life, but that boy from the block, he's still in there carrying all that baggage, and Lena, she's part of it. Nia's fingers traced the rim of her glass. Her thoughts a tangled mess. She wanted to be angry, to storm back to Lucas and demand the truth, but a deeper part of her ached with something else. Fear. Fear that she'd never mean as much to him as Lena did. Fear that the man she loved was a stranger. "What do I do, Kyla?" she asked, her voice small. Kyla reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You fight, Nia. Not with Lena, not even with Lucas. You fight for yourself. Figure out what you need, not what he wants you to be." That evening, Nia met Lucas at a small diner near the hotel, a retro spot with cracked vinyl booths and the smell of greasy burgers lingering in the air. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his face. He looked tired, his usual polish fraying at the edges, shirt slightly wrinkled, eyes red-rimmed. For the first time, Nia saw the boy Kyla had described, the one who'd grown up with nothing but dreams and desperation. "I don't want to lose you," Lucas said, his voice low as he reached for her hand across the table. His touch was warm, familiar, but Nia pulled back her heart too raw. "Then talk to me," she said, her eyes searching his. "Tell me about Lena." "All of it," he sighed, leaning back in the booth, the vinyl creaking under his weight. For a long moment he stared at the coffee mug in front of him, as if the answers were hidden in its depths. Then slowly, he began to speak. "We grew up together," he said, his voice distant, like he was stepping back into a memory. "Same block, same struggles. My dad was a drunk. My mom worked 3 jobs. Lena lived with her grandma Alma in a duplex next door. We were inseparable. Nia, 2 kids with big plans to get out of Detroit." Nia listened, her chest tight, as Lucas's words painted a picture she'd never seen. He told her about sneaking into abandoned factories to watch the sunrise, about Lena, teaching him to draw her charcoal-stained fingers, guiding his... about the nights they'd sit on her grandma's porch, dreaming of a world where they weren't defined by their zip code. Then came the memory that changed everything. The one Lucas's voice broke on. "I was 17, stupid, running with the wrong crowd. Stole a car one night, thought I was untouchable. Crashed it into a ditch. I should have died. Nia, blood everywhere, my leg pinned. Lena found me. Don't ask me how, she just knew. She dragged me out, cleaned me up, got me home before the cops came. She saved me." Nia's hand flew to her mouth, tears pricking her eyes. The image of a teenage Lucas, broken and bleeding, was too much. But it was the way he spoke about Lena, soft, reverent, that cut deeper. "What happened after that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We fell in love," he said simply, his eyes distant. "First love, you know. The kind that feels like it'll last forever. We had plans. Me to college, her to art school, but life doesn't care about plans." He paused, and Nia sensed the weight of what came next, the part he didn't want to relive. "My dad died that year. Heart attack. Mom couldn't keep up with the bills, and we lost the house. I dropped out, worked double shifts at a warehouse. Lena was there always, but I pushed her away. I was drowning. Nia, angry at the world, at myself. One night, I stood on the edge of a bridge, ready to end it. Nia's breath hitched her heart, aching for the boy he'd been. "What stopped you, Lena?" he said, his voice cracking. She found me, talked me down, held me until I could breathe again. She reminded me. We had dreams that I was more than my mistakes. The diner faded away, the clatter of dishes and hum of conversation drowned out by the intensity of his words. Nia saw it all, the cold steel of the bridge, the rain-soaked night, Lena's arms around a broken Lucas. And then, as if the memory was too much, he took her back to a different one that made her pulse race for entirely different reasons. "We were 18, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Lena snuck us into an old warehouse, one of those abandoned places where artists left their mark. It was freezing rain pounding the roof, but she'd brought a blanket, a couple of beers. We sat there drawing on the walls, laughing like the world couldn't touch us." His voice softened, and Nia knew what was coming. She kissed me that night under a broken window where the streetlights poured in. The rain was loud, but all I could hear was her breathing. All I could feel was her against me. The memory unfolded like a film in Nia's mind, vivid and raw. She could see them, young Lucas and Lena, their bodies pressed together in the dim light, the air thick with the scent of rain and rust. Lena's curls brushing his cheek, her hands slipping under his jacket, his fingers tracing the curve of her spine. Their kisses were desperate, hungry, the kind that burned away the cold. The streetlights flickered through the shattered glass, painting their skin in gold and shadow, and the sound of their gasps mingled with the relentless drum of rain. It was a moment of pure, reckless love, forged in a world that offered them nothing else. Nia's throat tightened, jealousy and awe warring inside her. She wanted to hate Lena, to see her as a rival, but the image of that warehouse of two kids clinging to each other in the dark was too real. "What happened to her?" she asked, forcing the words out. Lucas's smile faded. "I got a scholarship, a chance to start over in Seattle. Lena stayed behind her. Grandma was sick, needed her. We tried to make it work, but distance. It's a killer. She told me to stop waiting. Said we were holding each other back. I didn't hear from her again. Until last night." The weight of his words settled over Nia, heavy and cold. She wanted to reach for him to bridge the gap between them, but her hands stayed in her lap. "Why didn't you tell me about her, Lucas?" "Not once in all this time. Because talking about Lena means talking about who I was," he said, his voice raw. "A kid with nothing, full of shame and mistakes. I wanted to be someone else with you, Nia, someone worthy of you." Her heart twisted, torn between love and betrayal. She loved the man sitting across from her, but she didn't know him. Not really. And the woman who did the one who'd saved him was out there painting murals and haunting his eyes. Nia left the diner with more questions than answers, the city's pulse matching the chaos in her mind. She walked through Detroit's art district, where murals bloomed on every wall, vivid, defiant bursts of color against the gray decay. The air smelled of spray paint and asphalt, and the distant hum of traffic was a constant undercurrent. She stopped at a mural, a massive piece depicting a phoenix rising from ashes, its wings spread wide. The signature in the corner read, L. Harper. Nia's chest ached as she traced the letters with her eyes. Lena wasn't just a ghost from Lucas's past. She was a force, a woman who'd shaped him in ways Nia was only beginning to understand. The mural's fiery hues seemed to pulse under the streetlights, a challenge and a warning. Nia's phone buzzed a text from Kyla. Found something else about Lena. Call me. She didn't call, not yet. Instead, she stood there, the night wrapping around her like a second skin. and made a decision. She wasn't running back to Miami and she wasn't giving up on Lucas, but she wasn't fighting for him either, not the way she'd thought. She was fighting for herself, for the truth, for the strength to walk away, if that's what it took. The mural loomed above her, its phoenix staring down with unyielding eyes. Nia straightened her jaw, set. Whatever secrets Lena Harper held, whatever hold she had on Lucas, Nia would face them head on. Because if love was worth having, it was worth knowing every beautiful broken piece of it. The Atlanta sun hung low in the sky, painting the city in hues of amber and rose, as Nia Thompson stepped off the plane at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. The air was thick with the familiar scent of magnolia blossoms and jet fuel, a reminder of home that both comforted and unsettled her. She hadn't planned to come back, not yet. But after Detroit, after the raw truth of Lucas Bennett's past with Lena Harper, Miami felt too bright, too shallow. She needed roots, the kind only Atlanta could give her. Her mother's house in the West End was a two-story craftsman, its porch sagging slightly under the weight of years and stories. The smell of cornbread and collard greens hit Nia the moment she opened the door, wrapping her in a warmth that made her eyes sting. Celeste Thompson stood in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour, her braids pulled back in a neat bun. She looked up, her face softening into a smile that held both love and knowing. "Baby girl," Celeste said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You look like you're carrying the world." Nia dropped her suitcase by the door and sank into her mother's arms, the familiar scent of cocoa butter and spices grounding her. "I just needed to come home, Mama," she whispered, her voice catching. Celeste held her at arm's length, her dark eyes searching Nia's face. "This about that man of yours, or something deeper?" Nia didn't answer, not yet. She wasn't ready to unpack the mess of her heart. Lucas's haunted eyes, Lena's phoenix mural, the way her engagement ring felt like a lie. Instead, she let her mother guide her to the kitchen table where a plate of fried chicken and macaroni waited, the kind of meal that could mend a soul if only for a moment. The next few days were a blur of comfort and confrontation. Nia threw herself into helping at Celeste's soul food restaurant, Mama's Place, a cozy spot in the heart of the West End, where the walls were lined with photos of family friends and the occasional local celebrity. The air was thick with the smell of smoked brisket and peach cobbler, and the chatter of regulars filled the space with life. Nia bussed tables, poured sweet tea, and smiled through the ache in her chest. But every clink of a plate, every burst of laughter reminded her of what she was running from. Her sister Zara showed up on the third day, her dancer's frame moving with a grace that belied her sharp tongue. She slid into a booth across from Nia during a lull, her hoop earrings glinting under the fluorescent lights. "So," Zara said, peeling the label off a bottle of Coke, "you gonna tell me why you're hiding out here instead of planning your fairy tale wedding?" Nia sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's not that simple, Zara. It never is with you." Zara shot back, but her eyes were soft. "Spill it, sis. What's got you looking like you lost your best friend?" Nia hesitated, then let it all pour out: the engagement party, Lucas's dance with Lena, the story of their past, the way he'd looked at Lena like she was his oxygen. Zara listened, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "You're losing yourself, Nia," she said, when Nia finished, her voice firm. "I've seen you light up a room, make everyone believe in your magic. But this, chasing after a man who's chasing a ghost, that's not you." Nia's throat tightened, Zara's words hitting like a punch. "I love him," she said, but the words felt hollow, like they belonged to someone else. "Love don't mean you stop being you," Zara replied, leaning forward. "You're Nia Thompson, the woman who turned a block party into a festival, who made art out of chaos. Don't let some billionaire's baggage dim your shine." The words lingered heavy and true as Nia cleared the table. She wanted to argue, to defend the life she'd built with Lucas, But a part of her knew Zara was right. She'd been so caught up in his world, the penthouses, the private jets, that she'd forgotten her own. That afternoon, Nia found herself at a community center in the old Fourth Ward, a place where kids painted murals on concrete walls and dreamed bigger than their circumstances. She'd volunteered there as a teen, and Celeste had suggested she stop by to remember who you are. The air smelled of spray paint and fresh-cut grass, and the sound of laughter echoed across the lot. Nia watched a group of kids, their hands streaked with color, transform a blank wall into a vibrant scene of Atlanta's skyline. One of the organizers, a woman named Tasha, handed Nia a can of paint. "Join us," she said, her smile wide. "You used to be a legend around here." Nia hesitated, then took the can the weight, familiar in her hand. She started with a simple outline, a tree, its branches reaching for the sky. But soon she was lost in it. The rhythm of the spray, the hiss of the can, the way the colors blended under the afternoon sun. For the first time in weeks, she felt alive, like she was creating something that was hers alone. As she stepped back to admire the mural, her phone buzzed. A text from Kyla. "Got more on Lena. Call me when you're ready." Nia's stomach twisted, but she wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, she stayed until dusk painting and laughing with the kids, the weight of Detroit lifting, if only for a moment. When she finally called Kyla that night, sprawled on her childhood bed with its faded quilt, she braced herself for whatever came next. Lena's grandma. Alma was sick for years. Kyla said, her voice crackling through the phone. Cancer. Lena gave up everything, art school, her dreams, even Lucas, to take care of her. Alma passed a couple years ago, and Lena's been rebuilding her life ever since. That's why she's back in Detroit painting those murals. It's her way of healing. Nia stared at the ceiling, the glow-in-the-dark stars from her teenage years still faintly visible. So she left him for her grandma, she said, piecing it together. Not because she stopped loving him. Exactly, Kyla said. And Lucas, he's been carrying that guilt ever since. Thinks he failed her by moving on. Nia's chest ached, a mix of admiration and envy. Lena wasn't just a rival. She was a woman who'd sacrificed everything for love, not just for Lucas, but for her family. It made Nia question her own choices, the way she'd let Lucas's world swallow her own. 2 days later, Nia was locking up Mama's place, the night air cool against her skin, when a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows. Lucas in a dark jacket and jeans, his hair slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it. The streetlights cast long shadows across his face, and his hazel eyes held a mix of hope and desperation. "Nia," he said, his voice rough. "I couldn't wait for you to come back. I'm sorry for everything." Her heart lurched, but she crossed her arms, keeping her distance. "You should have told me about her, Lucas." "From the start." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "I was scared. Scared you'd see the mess I used to be and walk away. But I'm here now. Nia, I want us, I want you." His words were a lifeline, and for a moment she wanted to grab it to fall back into the dream they'd built. But Zara's voice echoed in her head. "Don't let his baggage dim your shine." She shook her head, her voice steady. "I need time, Lucas, to figure out what I want." He nodded, his jaw tight, and for a moment they stood there, the hum of the city filling the silence. Then he reached for her hand. His touch, warm, electric. "Can I see you? Just for tonight?" Against her better judgment, she agreed. They ended up at a friend's apartment in Midtown, a small loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Atlanta's skyline. The room was dark, lit only by the soft glow of streetlights filtering through sheer curtains, and a jazz record spun on an old turntable, its notes low and sultry. The air smelled faintly of cedar and wine, and Nia's pulse raced as Lucas poured her a glass, his fingers brushing hers. "I missed you," he murmured, setting his glass down and closing the distance between them. His hands found her waist, pulling her close, and Nia's resolve wavered. The music wrapped around them, the saxophone's wail mirroring the ache in her heart. "Lucas?" She whispered, her hands on his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart. "This doesn't fix anything." "I know," he said, his lips brushing her forehead. "But let me remind you what we have." The kiss was slow at first, tentative, like they were rediscovering each other. Then it deepened, hungry, desperate. His hands slid up her back, fingers tracing the curve of her spine through her thin blouse, igniting sparks across her skin. Nia's breath hitched as he lifted her onto the counter, his body pressing against hers, the heat of him overwhelming. The city lights danced through the windows, painting their skin in gold and shadow, and the jazz record's rhythm matched the pulse of their breaths. His lips trailed down her neck, warm and deliberate, and Nia's fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. The cedar scent of his cologne mixed with the wine on his breath, intoxicating her. "You're everything," he whispered against her skin, his voice raw, and for a moment she believed him. Their bodies moved together, a dance as instinctive as the one they'd shared in Miami, but heavier, weighted with unspoken truths. But when they pulled apart, breathless, Nia saw it again. That shadow in his eyes, the one that belonged to Lena. She slid off the counter, smoothing her blouse, her heart pounding. "I can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "Not until I know who you really are." Lucas reached for her, but she stepped back, the space between them. A chasm. "I love you, Nia," he said, his voice breaking. "That's real." "Maybe," she said, grabbing her jacket. "But it's not enough." Nia spent the next day at Piedmont Park, sitting on a bench by the lake, the water glinting under the midday sun. The air was alive with the sound of kids playing, dogs barking, and the distant strum of a busker's guitar. She'd called her mother that morning, spilling everything: Lucas's confession, Lena's sacrifice, the way her own dreams had gotten lost in the dazzle of his world. Celeste's words had been simple, but piercing. "You don't need a man to complete you. Nia, you're already a masterpiece." Now, as she watched a flock of birds scatter across the sky, Nia felt a shift inside her. She'd come to Atlanta to escape, but maybe she'd needed to come home to remember. Remember the girl who'd painted murals with her friends, who dreamed of a gallery filled with voices like hers. Remember the woman who didn't need a billionaire's ring to shine. Her phone buzzed, another text from Kyla Lena's in Atlanta this weekend. "Art showcase downtown. You want me to get you in Nia's fingers?" Hovered over the screen, her heart racing. She could keep running, keep pretending Lena was just a ghost, or she could face the truth and decide what she was willing to fight for. She typed a reply, her jaw set. "Get me in the park," stretched out before her, vibrant and alive, and for the first time in weeks, Nia felt a spark of her old fire. Whatever happened next, she wasn't just Lucas's fiancée anymore. She was Nia Thompson, and she was ready to reclaim her story. Seattle's gray skies pressed down like a bruise, the air heavy with the promise of rain, as Nia Thompson stepped out of her cab at Pike Place Market. The market buzzed with life vendors shouting about fresh salmon, the sharp scent of coffee mingling with the briny tang of Puget Sound. Tourists snapped photos of the iconic neon sign, its red glow flickering against the overcast day. Nia pulled her leather jacket tighter, her boots clicking on the cobblestones as she navigated the crowd. She'd come to Seattle to face Lucas Bennett, to demand clarity, but her heart was a tangle of hope and dread. Atlanta had given her a spark, a reminder of who she was, but it hadn't erased the pull of Lucas, the way his touch set her skin ablaze, the way his rare smiles felt like a gift. She'd seen Lena's name on the guest list for a tech art crossover event Lucas was hosting tonight, and Kyla's text had sealed her decision. Lena's presenting a mural project with Lucas's company. You sure you want to walk into this? Nia wasn't sure of anything anymore, but she knew running wasn't an option. She spotted Lucas before he saw her standing near a flower stall, his dark hair damp from the drizzle. He was laughing, his head tilted toward Lena Harper, who stood beside him in a denim jacket, her curls catching the light from a nearby lamp. They were surrounded by crates of dahlias and sunflowers, the colors vivid against the market's muted tones. Lena gestured animatedly, pointing at a sketch pad, and Lucas nodded, his smile unguarded in a way Nia hadn't seen in weeks. The sight hit her like a fist, stealing her breath. For a moment she considered turning back, disappearing into the crowd. But then Lucas looked up, his hazel eyes locking onto hers, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. His smile faded, replaced by a mix of surprise and guilt. Lena followed his gaze, her expression unreadable, and Nia forced herself to move forward, her heart pounding like a drum. "Nia," Lucas said, his voice warm but cautious. "You didn't tell me you were coming. Thought I'd surprise you," she said, her tone lighter than she felt. She glanced at Lena, who offered a small, hesitant smile. "Good to see you again, Lena." "You too," Lena said, her voice steady but kind. "I heard you're killing it with that community mural project in Atlanta." Nia nodded, caught off guard by the genuine warmth in Lena's words. "Trying to keep up with artists like you," she said, forcing a smile. The air between them was charged not with hostility, but with an unspoken understanding. They were two women caught in the same storm, and neither wanted to be the one to break. Lucas shifted his hand, brushing Nia's arm. "Can we talk alone?" She nodded, and Lena excused herself, disappearing into the market's bustle. Lucas led Nia to a quieter corner near the water, where the sound of waves lapping against the pier mingled with the distant hum of traffic. The air was cool, carrying the faint saltiness of the sound, and Nia's breath caught as Lucas turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "I've been a mess without you," he said, his voice low. "I meant what I said in Atlanta. Nia, I love you. I want us." Her chest tightened, his words both a bomb and a blade. "Then why does it feel like I'm competing with her?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Every time you're with Lena, it's like I disappear." He flinched, running a hand through his damp hair. "It's not like that. She's a part of who I was, but you're who I choose." "Nia." Every day. She wanted to believe him, but the image of him laughing with Lena, so at ease, burned in her mind. "I need more than words, Lucas," she said, stepping closer, her voice fierce. "I need to know you're all in, because I'm not some placeholder for a love you lost." His eyes darkened, and before she could react, he cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "You're not a placeholder," he said, his voice rough. "You're everything." The kiss was sudden, fierce, a collision of need and frustration. His lips were warm, tasting faintly of coffee, and Nia's hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer. The world fell away. The market, the waves, the weight of Lena's presence. There was only Lucas, his body pressed against hers, his hands sliding to her waist, igniting sparks across her skin. The drizzle coated their faces, cool against the heat of their breaths, and for a moment Nia let herself believe they could outrun the past. But when they pulled apart, panting, she saw it again, that flicker of doubt in his eyes. She stepped back, her heart racing, the salt air sharp in her lungs. "Prove it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Prove I'm enough." The tech art event was held in Lucas's company headquarters, a sleek glass tower overlooking Seattle's waterfront. The lobby was transformed into a gallery with Lena's murals projected on massive screens, their vibrant colors pulsing to a lo-fi beat. The air smelled of citrus from catered cocktails, and the clink of glasses mingled with the hum of conversation. Nia moved through the crowd in a fitted emerald dress. Her curls swept to one side, drawing eyes with every step. But she felt like an outsider, the whispers of Lucas's colleagues cutting through her confidence. She's stunning, but does she fit in his world? One woman murmured, her voice low, but not low enough. Temporary, probably. A man replied, sipping his drink. Lucas always goes for the shiny new thing. Nia's jaw tightened, but she kept her smile in place, her years of event planning teaching her how to hide the hurt. She found Jaden Carter, Lucas's lead engineer, near a display of AI-driven art. Jaden was lanky, with a quick grin and a habit of speaking before thinking, and Nia had always liked his unfiltered energy. "Looking fierce, Nia," Jaden said, raising his glass. "Didn't expect to see you here after, well, you know." She arched an eyebrow, sensing an opening. "After what? The engagement party?" Jaden winced, clearly regretting his words. "Yeah, that. Look, I shouldn't say anything. But Lucas and Lena, they've got history. Deep history. He was gonna propose to her back in the day. Had a ring and everything." Nia's stomach dropped, the room tilting. "A ring," she repeated, her voice barely audible. Jaden nodded, glancing around nervously. "Yeah, but it didn't happen. She left. He moved on, or tried to. Seeing her again's got him all messed up." Nia forced a nod, her mind reeling. Lucas had never mentioned a ring, never hinted that his love for Lena had gone that far. The realization settled like a stone in her chest, heavy and cold. She excused herself, weaving through the crowd, her emerald dress catching the light like a beacon in the storm. She found Lena near a projection of her latest mural, a swirling depiction of Detroit's rebirth. Lena's denim dress was simple, but her presence was magnetic, her brown eyes warm as she greeted Nia. "You holding up okay?" Lena asked, her voice soft but direct. Nia hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Not really. This whole thing. Lucas, you me. It's a lot." Lena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I never meant to stir things up. Nia, I came to Detroit for my art. Not for him, but seeing him. It brought back things I thought I'd buried." "Like what?" Nia asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Lena's gaze drifted to the mural, its colors shifting under the gallery lights. "Love, regret. The life we could have had. But I don't want to hurt you, Nia. I just needed to see him, to know he's okay." Nia's throat tightened, torn between admiration and frustration. Lena wasn't the villain she'd wanted her to be. She was human, flawed and honest in a way that made Nia's heart ache. "He's not okay," she said finally. "Not when he's still looking at you like you're his home." Lena's eyes glistened, but she didn't respond. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the weight of truths neither wanted to face. Nia turned away, her heels clicking on the polished floor, her mind a battlefield of love and doubt. The event's climax was a gala in the tower's top-floor ballroom, a glittering space with chandeliers casting prisms across the walls. The air was warm, scented with jasmine from floral arrangements, and a pianist played a soft melody that wove through the crowd's laughter. Nia stood by a window, the Seattle skyline stretching out below its lights, blurred by the rain now falling steadily outside. She felt like she was drowning, caught between the life she'd dreamed of with Lucas and the reality of his divided heart. Lucas found her there, his tuxedo sharp, his expression a mix of determination and fear. "Dance with me," he said, offering his hand. She wanted to refuse to walk away, but her body betrayed her, her hand slipping into his. They moved to the center of the floor, the crowd parting eyes following them. The music shifted to a slow, aching ballad, and Lucas pulled her close, his hand firm on her waist. The chandelier light caught the emerald of her dress, making her glow, but Nia's heart was a storm. "I'm trying, Nia," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "I'm trying to be the man you deserve." "Then stop holding back," she said, her voice fierce. "Stop pretending she's not still in you." His grip tightened, his eyes searching hers, and for a moment she thought he might confess everything. The ring, the love he couldn't bury. Instead, he kissed her, right there in the middle of the ballroom in front of everyone. It was a kiss that burned fierce and desperate, his lips claiming hers with a hunger that stole her breath. The room spun, the piano's notes fading into the rush of blood in her ears. His hands slid up her back, pressing her closer, and Nia's fingers dug into his shoulders, caught between surrender and defiance. The jasmine scent enveloped them, the chandelier's prisms dancing across their skin, and the rain outside pattered against the windows, a soft counterpoint to the heat of their embrace. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Shock, envy, curiosity. But Nia didn't care. This was her, claiming him, her fighting for what they had, even as her heart screamed that it might not be enough. When they pulled apart, breathless, the room came back into focus. Lena stood at the edge of the crowd, her face unreadable, and Nia's stomach twisted. Lucas's hand lingered on her cheek, his eyes pleading, but the doubt in them was a knife. She stepped back, her lips still tingling, her voice steady, despite the tears threatening to spill. "What now, Lucas?" She asked, her words a challenge. "What happens when the music stops?" He didn't answer, and the silence was louder than any confession. Nia turned her dress swirling and walked away, the weight of the crowd's eyes heavy on her back. She'd fought for him, poured her heart into that kiss, but it hadn't filled the void. Lena was still there, a shadow she couldn't outrun, and Nia was done pretending she could. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist, coating Nia's skin as she stood on the tower's rooftop terrace, the city's lights, a blurry glow below. The air was sharp with the scent of wet concrete and distant pine, and the sound of traffic was a low hum grounding her. She gripped the railing, her emerald dress damp at the edges, and let the tears come hot and silent. Kyla found her there, her umbrella, a useless shield against the mist. "That was one hell of a show," she said, her voice gentle. "You okay?" "No," Nia admitted, wiping her eyes. "But I will be." Kyla nodded, her braids glistening with rain. "You're stronger than you know, Nia. Whatever happens next, you've got this." Nia managed a small smile, the words a lifeline. She didn't know what tomorrow held, whether she'd fight for Lucas, confront Lena, or walk away entirely. But as the city stretched out before her, its lights defiant against the dark, she felt a flicker of her old fire. She wasn't just a fiancé, a lover, a woman caught in a storm. She was Nia Thompson, and she was ready to choose herself, no matter the cost. The Seattle rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and gleaming under a rare, clear night. Nia Thompson stood outside Lucas Bennett's glass tower, the waterfront's lights reflecting off the wet pavement like scattered stars. The air was sharp with the scent of salt and pine, and the distant hum of ferries across Puget Sound grounded her racing thoughts. Her emerald dress from the gala clung to her skin, still damp from the rooftop, but she barely noticed. Her mind was on the kiss. Fierce, desperate, a moment that had burned bright but left her emptier than before. She hadn't gone back inside after leaving Lucas on the dance floor. The weight of the crowd's eyes, Lena's quiet presence, and Jaden's revelation about the ring Lucas had once meant for her. It was too much. Nia had walked the waterfront for hours, her heels clicking against the boardwalk until her phone buzzed with a text from Kyla. "Found something you need to see. Meet me at the hotel." Now in Kyla's hotel room, Nia sat on the edge of a chair, her hands clasped tightly as Kyla scrolled through her laptop. The room was small, lit by a single lamp that cast warm shadows across the walls, and the faint smell of lavender from a diffuser hung in the air. Kyla's braids were loose, framing her face, and her expression was a mix of excitement and caution. "You're not going to believe this," Kyla said, turning the screen toward Nia. It showed a photo of a mural in Detroit, one Nia hadn't seen before. A boy and a girl, their silhouettes painted against a fiery sunset. Hands clasped as if defying the world. The signature read, L. Harper, and in the corner, faint but legible, was a handwritten note. "Live for yourself, Lucas." Nia's breath caught her fingers tracing the screen. "This is them," she whispered. "Lucas and Lena." Kyla nodded. Found it in an old art forum post. Lena painted this right after they broke up before she disappeared from the scene. That note. It's not just a signature, Nia, it's a goodbye. She didn't just leave him for her grandma. She left so he could chase his dreams without her holding him back. Nia's chest tightened, a flood of emotions crashing over her: admiration, grief, and a strange relief Lena hadn't abandoned Lucas out of weakness or indifference. She'd sacrificed her own heart to set him free. It was a kind of love Nia couldn't compete with, not because it was stronger, but because it was foundational, woven into the very fabric of who Lucas was. "What do I do with this?" Nia asked, her voice barely audible. Kyla leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "You use it, Nia, not to fight Lena, but to understand. You deserve the truth, all of it, and so does he." Nia nodded, her resolve hardening. She couldn't keep running from the shadow of Lena Harper. She needed to face it, to face Lucas, and to decide what she was willing to carry forward. "I need to see them," she said, standing. "Both of them." Kyla raised an eyebrow. "You sure? That's a lot to walk into." "I'm sure," Nia said, her voice steady for the first time in days. "I'm done being afraid." Nia didn't tell Lucas she was coming to Santa Fe. She'd overheard him mention a weekend retreat there, a chance to finalize the tech art project with Lena, and she'd booked a flight without a second thought. The New Mexico desert stretched out before her rental car, a vast expanse of red earth and sagebrush under a sky so wide it felt like it could swallow her whole. The air was dry, scented with dust and pinyon, and the silence was a stark contrast to Seattle's constant hum. She found them at an adobe villa on the outskirts of Santa Fe, its terracotta walls glowing under the late afternoon sun. The courtyard was strung with fairy lights, their soft glow just beginning to flicker as dusk settled in. Lucas and Lena sat at a wooden table, sketches and laptops spread out before them, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Nia paused at the gate, her heart pounding, but she squared her shoulders and stepped forward. Lucas saw her first, his eyes widening as he stood. "Nia, what are you doing here?" Lena turned, her expression a mix of surprise and something softer. "Respect, maybe, Nia," she said, standing as well. "It's good to see you." Nia nodded, her throat tight. "I need to talk to both of you." Lucas hesitated, then gestured to the table. "Sit, please." The three of them settled under the fairy lights, the air cooling as the sun dipped below the horizon. The scent of mesquite smoke from a nearby fire pit hung in the air, and the distant howl of a coyote added a haunting underscore to the moment. Nia took a deep breath, her hands clasped in her lap, and began. "I found your mural." "Lena," she said, her voice steady, the one with the note. "Live for yourself, Lucas. I know what you did, why you left him, and I need to understand where that leaves us." Lena's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "I didn't want to hurt him," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Or you." Back then, Lucas was on the edge of something big, a scholarship, a chance to get out of Detroit. But I was tied to my grandma, to a life that would have held him back, so I let him go. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Lucas's jaw tightened, his hands fisting on the table. "You never told me," he said, his voice raw. "All these years I thought you just stopped loving me." Lena shook her head, tears spilling over. "I never stopped, Lucas, but I loved you enough to want more for you. And when I saw you in Detroit with Nia, I thought you'd found it." Nia's heart ached, the weight of Lena's sacrifice settling over her. She turned to Lucas, her eyes searching his. "And what about now?" she asked. "What do you want, Lucas? Because I can't keep living in her shadow." Lucas's gaze darted between them, his face a battlefield of guilt and longing. "I love you, Nia," he said, his voice breaking. "You've brought light into my life, a kind I never thought I'd find. But Lena," he paused, his eyes locking onto Lena's. "She's part of me, the part that survived, that made me who I am. I don't know how to let that go." The words were a knife sharp and final. Nia's breath caught, but she didn't look away. "Then you need to figure it out," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "Because I deserve someone who's all in, and so does she." Lena reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on Nia's. "You're stronger than you know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Whatever happens, you're enough." Nia nodded, the warmth of Lena's touch grounding her. She stood, the fairy lights casting soft shadows across her face. "I need some air," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You two should talk." Nia wandered into the desert, the villa's lights fading behind her as the moon rose full and silver, bathing the landscape in an ethereal glow. The air was cool, scented with sage and earth, and the crunch of gravel under her boots was the only sound in the vast silence. She stopped at a rocky outcrop, her breath visible in the chill, and let the tears come hot and unrelenting. She didn't hear Lucas approach until he was beside her, his presence a quiet weight in the dark. "Nia," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry." She turned, the moonlight catching the planes of his face, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. For what, she asked, her voice trembling. For loving her, or for making me believe I could be enough? "For hurting you," he said, stepping closer. "I never wanted this. I thought I could leave her behind. But seeing her, it's like opening a wound I thought had healed." Nia's chest ached, but she held his gaze. "Then why did you let me fall for you? Lucas, why propose? Why promise me forever if you weren't sure?" He reached for her, his hands cupping her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Because I love you," he said, his voice fierce. "Because every moment with you feels like a miracle. But I'm broken, Nia, and I don't know if I can give you what you deserve." The words shattered her, but they also set her free. She stepped into his arms, her body trembling as she let herself feel him one last time. The moonlight painted their skin in silver, and the desert silence wrapped around them, a cocoon of grief and love. His lips found hers, soft at first, then hungry, a kiss that tasted of salt and regret. His hands slid down her back, pulling her close, and Nia's fingers tangled in his hair, her body arching against his. The sage-scented air was cool against their heated skin, and the distant howl of a coyote mingled with their ragged breaths. Lucas's hands traced the curve of her hips, his touch reverent, like he was memorizing her. Nia's blouse slipped off one shoulder, the moonlight illuminating the smooth expanse of her skin, and Lucas's lips followed warm and deliberate, igniting sparks that made her gasp. They sank to the ground, the gravel rough beneath them, but all Nia felt was him, the heat of his body, the thud of his heart, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. "I'll always love you," he murmured against her skin, his voice breaking, "no matter what." But as they lay there, the desert stretching out around them, Nia knew it wasn't enough. She pulled back, her eyes locked on his, the moonlight reflecting the truth. They couldn't escape. "I love you, Lucas," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm not your home. She is." She stood brushing the dust from her jeans and walked away, the moon lighting her path. Lucas didn't follow, and the silence behind her was louder than any goodbye. Back at the villa, Nia found Lena in the courtyard sitting alone under the fairy lights. The fire pit had died to embers, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke and night-blooming flowers. Lena looked up, her eyes searching Nia's face, and Nia saw the same mix of hope and fear she felt. "Did you talk?" Nia asked, sitting across from her. Lena nodded, her hands clasped tightly. "We did. He's still the boy I loved, but he's also the man who loves you. I told him to choose Nia, to be honest with himself." Nia's throat tightened. Lena's words a mirror to her own. "And what did he say?" "He didn't," Lena said, her voice soft. "But I think we both know." They sat in silence, the fairy lights twinkling above, and Nia felt a strange peace settle over her. Lena wasn't her enemy. She was a woman who'd loved deeply just as Nia had. And in that shared truth, there was strength. "I'm going back to Miami," Nia said finally. "I need to figure out who I am without him." Lena reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're going to be incredible," she said, her eyes sincere. "You already are." Nia smiled, the first real smile in days, and stood. The desert night stretched out before her, vast and full of possibility. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She was ready to write her own story, one where she was the hero, not the shadow. The Miami sunrise was a quiet miracle, its golden light spilling across the ocean, turning the waves into a shimmering canvas. Nia Thompson stood on South Beach, her bare feet sinking into the cool sand, the salt air tangling her curls. The horizon glowed with promise, and for the first time in months, her heart felt light, unburdened by the weight of a love that wasn't hers to keep. The hum of early joggers and the soft crash of waves filled the air, a symphony of beginnings, and Nia let it wash over her, cleansing the last traces of Santa Fe's desert dust. She'd left Lucas Bennett and Lena Harper behind in that adobe villa, their silhouettes fading under the fairy lights as she drove into the night. The memory of Lucas's touch, the moonlight on his skin, the ache in his voice still lingered, but it no longer held her captive. She'd chosen herself, and that choice had brought her here to a city that pulsed with life, to a future she was ready to shape. Nia's phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her mother. "Celeste. Proud of you, baby girl. Come by the restaurant later. We're making your favorite." She smiled, the warmth of home grounding her. Atlanta had reminded her who she was, but Miami was where she'd build who she'd become. Back in Miami, Nia threw herself into a dream she'd shelved for too long, opening an art gallery. With the money she'd saved from her event planning gigs and a generous settlement. Lucas had insisted on calling it an investment in your vision. She leased a small space in Wynwood where the walls were already alive with murals. The gallery, named Rise, was her love letter to artists like her, to voices that deserved to be heard. She spent weeks transforming the space, painting the walls. A crisp white hanging lights that mimicked the neon glow of her first night with Lucas. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility, and the sound of drills and laughter filled the days as she worked alongside local artists. Kyla was her biggest cheerleader, showing up with coffee and unsolicited advice. "You're a badass." "Nia," she said one afternoon, perched on a ladder as they hung a canvas. "This place, it's gonna change lives." Nia laughed, brushing paint from her hands. "One step at a time, Kai. I just want it to mean something." "It already does," Kyla said, her eyes serious. "You're not just building a gallery, You're building you." The words stayed with Nia, a reminder of the strength she'd found in letting go. She thought of Lena often, not with jealousy, but with gratitude. Lena's sacrifice had taught her that love wasn't about possession. It was about freedom for yourself and the ones you cared for. And Lucas. He was a chapter, not the whole story. She'd loved him fiercely, but she loved herself more. The gallery's opening night was a blur of color and sound. Wynwood came alive, the streets packed with artists, collectors, and curious locals. Neon signs buzzed, reggaeton pulsed from nearby bars, and the air was thick with the scent of street food and perfume. Nia moved through the crowd in a flowing gold dress, her curls loose, her smile radiant. The gallery's walls showcased vibrant works, graffiti, inspired portraits, abstract sculptures, a mural by a teenage artist Nia had mentored. Critics nodded approvingly, and the clink of champagne glasses filled the space with celebration. She was mid-conversation with a curator, when a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Nia, this is incredible." She turned her breath, catching. Lucas stood there, Lena at his side, their hands linked, matching gold bands glinting on their fingers. He looked different, lighter, the shadows in his hazel eyes gone. Lena's smile was warm, her denim dress a nod to her artist roots, and the ease between them spoke of a love that had found its way home. "Thank you," Nia said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "I'm glad you could make it. We wouldn't miss it," Lena said, her eyes sincere. "These artists are lucky to have you, Nia. You're giving them a voice?" Nia nodded, the compliment settling deep. "That's the plan," she said, glancing at Lucas. "You both look happy." "We are," Lucas said, his voice soft, "but I meant what I said in Santa Fe." "Nia, you're extraordinary. This," he gestured to the gallery, "it's proof." She smiled, a real smile, free of the pain that had once tethered her to him. "I'm finding my way," she said, "and I'm glad you found yours." They moved through the gallery, their laughter blending with the crowds, and Nia watched them from a distance, their silhouettes merging as they admired a painting. There was no ache, no longing, only peace. They'd found their place, and she'd found hers. As the night wound down, Nia stepped outside the Miami air, warm against her skin, the neon lights of Wynwood casting a familiar glow. The street was quieter now, the crowd thinning, and the scent of grilled arepas from a nearby food truck lingered in the breeze. She leaned against the gallery's wall, savoring the moment when a tap on her shoulder made her turn. "Hey, you're the mastermind behind this, right?" The man was tall, with warm brown skin and a musician's easy charm. His dreads tied back a guitar case slung over his shoulder. His smile was infectious, and his eyes held a spark that made Nia's pulse skip. "Guilty," she said, returning his smile. "I'm Nia Malik Evans," he said, offering his hand. "I played a set down the street, but I had to see what all the buzz was about. Your gallery's something special." "Thanks," she said, his hand warm against hers, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "You a local born and raised," he said, his voice smooth as the jazz records her mother loved. "I've been watching Wynwood grow, but this feels different. Feels like home." Nia's heart warmed, his words echoing her own hopes. They talked as the night deepened, the neon lights fading into the background. The sound of distant music, a soft undercurrent. Malik told her about his music, his gigs at local clubs, his dream of writing songs that told the city's stories. She shared her vision for Rise, her love for art that spoke truth. There was no pressure, no weight, just two people connecting, their laughter easy, their words flowing like the tide. When he offered to walk her to her car, she accepted the sand-dusted pavement cool under her sandals. The ocean was a dark expanse to their left, its waves a steady rhythm, and Malik's presence was a quiet comfort, like a song she hadn't known she needed. "You did something big tonight," he said, pausing by her car. "You should be proud." "I am," she said, meeting his eyes. "For the first time in a while, I really am." He smiled, his gaze holding hers. "Good. You're kinda glowing, you know that?" She laughed, the sound free and bright. "You're not so bad yourself, Malik." He handed her a card with his number, his fingers brushing hers. "Call me if you ever want to grab a coffee, or, change the world again." She tucked the card into her pocket, her heart light. "I just might." A week later, Nia stood on South Beach at dawn, the same spot where she'd begun her new chapter. The sky was a watercolor of pink and gold, the air alive with the scent of salt and possibility. Her phone buzzed with a text from Malik. "Heard you. Like sunrise walks. Mind some company next time." She smiled, warmth spreading through her, and typed a reply. "Only if you bring the coffee." She thought of Lucas and Lena, their gold bands, a symbol of a love that had survived time and distance. She thought of the gallery, its walls filled with stories waiting to be told, and she thought of herself, the girl who'd painted murals in Atlanta, the woman who'd loved fiercely and let go bravely, the artist who was just beginning to rise. Sometimes life gave you the fairy tale, the billionaire, the ring, the promise of forever, only to show you it wasn't what you needed. Nia had wanted the dream, but what she'd found was better. Her own strength, her own path, and a love that didn't ask her to be anything but herself. The ocean stretched out before her, endless and alive, and Nia stepped forward, the sand soft beneath her feet, ready for whatever came next. If Nia's journey to find herself touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and share your own story of love or self-discovery in the comments below. Let's keep exploring the stories that make us feel alive together.